YouTube channel Dr. Ausaf Biotech World. And if you like this video, then don't forget to subscribe this channel, share this video, like this video and press the bell icon. Assalamu alaikum, all my lovely and dear students. May peace, blessings and mercy of Almighty God be on all of you. Today, as I have already told you in my previous lectures, that we have discussed about the transgenic plants with the beneficial traits and the different aspects of the plant genetic engineering, how the plants are modified genetically, what are the strategies, and then what are the applications of the plant genetic engineering, what is somatic hybridization, what is the hybrid. All these things we have already discussed. This is the last topic of this chapter, the plant tissue culture, which is the last but one chapter of the CBSE book for class 12th. So students, the last topic that we are going to discuss regarding the plant tissue engineering is the biosafety in plant genetic engineering, means the ethical and the safety, the constraints. What could be the various constraints, what could be the downside, and what could be the various considerations that we have to take into account. The students, you know that the plant genetic engineering, it is very famous and it is becoming more and more popular. Why? Especially in the agriculture, because two things, the 2 points you have to remember: the quality of the crop and the quantity, which we call yield. And there are certain other basically applications of the GM crops. We can have a good quality, better quality, the yield is good. So on a commercial scale, it is becoming more and more popular. And as we know that the feed and the fiber security, it is also a very important point, a benefit of plant genetic engineering and the plant tissue culture techniques. And the healthcare industry. And not only this, we can improve the quality. For example, the various nutrients like vitamin A and iron, nutrient quality, nutrient improvement. And there are certain other benefits also, like the delayed fruit ripening and all there are so many examples that, and the somatic hybrids, for example the tomato or topato. So all these are the examples. And the best and the common examples that we know are the production of the insecticide and weedicide resistant plants. And the best example, you know, is the BT cotton that we have discussed in great detail. So these are the positive sides of the plant genetic engineering or the plant tissue culture. But as you know that every pros has cons. So there are certain negative and the downside of it, and there are certain ethical issues which are involved, and there are certain economic issues as well. So one by one we will discuss all the issues. The first concern, the first biosafety concern, the downside, or it is known as the constraints are concerns. So the first constraint is the safety of the GM food, safety of the GM food for humans as well as for the livestock, for the human and for the livestock, for the animals, for the domesticated animals. to the safety and security. Why? Because they can cause certain allergic reactions in them. Allergic reactions. They can elicit certain immunogenic responses. Immunogenic responses. So these are the certain issues which are basically involved in the plant tissue culture. Then another very important constraint is the effect of the GM crops on the environment. The effect of the GM crops on the environment and biodiversity, because the GM crops, they are not natural, their genomes have been modified. So what could they can affect, because you know that how they can affect our ecosystem, because you know that ecosystem is an interaction between the biotic and abiotic components of the environment. So our GM crops, genetically modified crops, they can have the what type of interaction with the biotic and abiotic factors. So this is, and in such a way they can affect the biodiversity. So this is another very important constraint. And the third constraint is related to their effect on the non-target insects and bacteria. Non-target insects and microorganisms. Means there are, you know that, for example, in the human gut and in the gut of the ruminants, there are certain microorganisms which are beneficial for us, and they have a symbiotic relationship with the animals. But these genetically modified crops, they can have an adverse effect on them, because they cannot differentiate between the beneficial and the non-beneficial traits. So on the non-target and the beneficial insects and the microbes, they can have an adverse effect. And another very important point is known as the gene pollution. They may lead to the gene pollution. What is gene pollution? That through the pollen, if there is a pollen formation, through the pollen, the the modified genome can spread to the other related plant species. And then it may lead to the production of the superweeds. What are the superweeds? Superweeds are the weeds which are resistant to the weedicides. Superweeds. So it may lead to the production of the superweeds. Through the pollens, the genetically modified genes, they can spread to the related plant species, which may lead to the production of the superweeds. Superweeds are resistant to any sort of weedicide, and they are having a competitive relationship with the plants, the crop plants. That is why they reduce the quality, both the quality and the quantity of the plants. So it will be very detrimental. So another very important point and the constraint is that there is one very important ethical issue which is involved. This is the point number 5, and the ethical issue is the effect on vegetative nature of the plant. Vegetative nature of the plant. Vegetative nature of the plant. Effect on vegetative means in the plant we may introduce the genes of the animals, the proteins of the animals, the essential amino acids from the animal sources. So there is an effect on the vegetative nature, because some people, they are pure vegans, means vegetarian. So if we can introduce a gene of interest that is in producing, for example, a particular protein that is from the animal source, or the essential amino acids for lysine or certain other amino acid from the animal source, then it will change, it may change the vegetative nature of the plant. And the ethical issue here is that whether should a vegetarian person may or may not consume, because of this ethical issue. Another very important issue that is involved is the horizontal transfer of the foreign genes into the microbes. Which genes? Especially the antibiotic resistant genes. The antibiotic resistant. Horizontal transfer of the foreign genes into the microbes. So if we are using the antibiotic markers, antibiotic resistant markers for our in developing the callus, the transgenic callus or the transgenic regeneration of the transgenic plant, then horizontally means that simultaneously, because we are preparing into agrobacterium, it may infect and it may lead to the transfer of those antibiotic resistant markers to the natural microflora of the environment. And what will be the disadvantage? What will be the greatest constraint for us? It will be the production of the antibiotic resistance in animals and human beings. Antibiotic resistance. So this is in the human and the animal pathogens. The antibiotic resistance may develop because of the use of the GM crops. The last point regarding the last constraint is the production of, the change in evolutionary pattern, because evolution is considered, speculated to be a continuous process. So in the evolutionary process, there might be a simple change in it. Okay, fine. So even after this, there is certain misinformation, misleading informations, misconceptions, superstitions, and the era, you know that there is a movement which criticizes the production of the GM crops, and they promote the organic crops in the market because they are more eco-friendly. So this is the era of the eco-friendly crops or the eco-friendly plants. That is why the organic crops are, there is a movement which says that we should have the organic food. Even instead of this movement and everything, there is very less evidence that proves that they are not beneficial for the human or for the livestock, and the scientific evidence that they are harmful for the environment is also not very supportive and very strong. That is why the market and the farmer, the commercial market is drastically and gradually it is increasing, and both the if you see the number of farmers and the number in the last few decades and the number of hectares of land cultivated and the consumers of the GM crops, you will see a gradual rise in all. For example, in 2009, there were a record of 14 million farmers cultivated the GM crops like BT cotton, soybean, the transgenic potatoes and the tomatoes. 14 million farmers, and they were from the 25 countries. They were from the 25 countries, and they cultivated 134 million hectares of land. So many people and scientists say that it is basically a very important change in the society that we are passing through, that we are watching, that there is a gradual rise in the use of the GM crops. And many people say that it is a technology that can solve various human problems. For example, the hunger, the disease, and certain other. So the students, I will conclude about this topic that even though there are so many applications and the benefits of using the GM crops or the plant tissue culture techniques, but there are some downsides of it. There are certain negativities which are basically associated with the GM crops or the GM food, and the very one important constraint is its effects on the micro and the macroeconomics of any country, and especially of the third world countries and the poor people, the humanity, the deprived portion, the deprived section of the humanity at large. So the economics, its impact on economy has also be taken, should also be taken into consideration. And as per my limited analytical capacity, what I can say that a very important downside, the negative point regarding the plant genetic engineering of the GM crop is it's continuously its support to the capitalism. What is capitalism? A tiny human population is controlling the majority of the resources. You know that the US, the United States, is considered to be the symbol of capitalism, and because of capitalism, the rich is getting richer and the poor is getting poorer. So it is also because all the companies which are controlling the GM crops and which are making the seeds and the genetically modified crops and insecticide resistant plants, they are the companies like Monsanto and other companies. They are the multinational companies, and the multinational companies, you know that they are instruments of the capitalists. And as I have said, that what is capitalism? It is, for example, the 2% of the human population is controlling the 80% of the biosphere resources, our natural resources, and the rest 98% of the population is dependent on only 20% of the resources. That is why there is a huge gap between the rich and the poor. That is why a large section of the humanity in Africa, in Asia, in the South Asia, in the Southeast Asia, they are deprived of the natural resources. And that is the reason of the inflation, why the inflation occurs. So a very important downside of using the GM crop is its support to capitalism. And I will conclude with a very good, wonderful, a very nice couplet of an Urdu poet. It is regarding capitalism. It is as follows: मुट्ठी में एक हाथ की किस्मत हजार की, मुट्ठी में एक हाथ की किस्मत हजार की, तौहीन है अदालत परवरदिगार की. Okay student, thank you so much and all the very best.